Peace, peace, peace. You're now tuned into the vault. Thank you for listening. It's your host, Sharif Ali. I just wanted to do a live episode, a quick episode for you all. Um, I just want to say thank you, everybody. As I always do, I want to start out this episode as we always do, thanking everybody for tuning in live wherever you are in the world. Thank you, peace and blessings for you to listen in the archives or in review. I want to thank you for listening as well, taking the time out of your schedule. The name of this episode is "How to Start a Trust Without Any Assets." Once again, this is Sharif Ali on the Vault. Normally, I broadcast Tuesdays at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 7 p.m. Pacific. 7 p.m. Central, 5 p.m. Pacific. Just want to thank you for listening to this recording. This is going to be the how to start a trust without any assets. Once again, this is your host, Sharif Ali. So just want to go ahead and start out this episode as I always do, thanking the ancestors, the universe, and the creator. It's always good to start out every episode with thanks and things of that nature. So we're just going to go ahead and hop into the subject. How to start a trust without any assets is real simple. A lot of people say, oh, you have to have $1 million. You have to, have all of these assets inside of your trust, or, you have to have a house, or you have to have a car. How can I start it? I'm going to tell you very simply. A trust is a contract. Okay? So when you sitting at the table and you say, okay, I have to have a contract. Thank you, Wi-Fi. Appreciate you for typing into the chat. Thank you for typing in. I always like to hear feedback, so I'm glad you can hear me, live, and I'm happy and thankful for that. But point being, this is when you start out your trust, you have a contract. Okay. So when people say, do I have to have anything to start out the trust? The only thing you need to have, and this is the secret that no one's going to tell you, that I'm going to tell you, that you can go ahead and do. You are the trustee of the trust. Okay? Let's be quite clear who you are in this trust situation here. You are the trustee. Why are you the trustee? You're the trustee because you're here to grow the assets. So people say, well, don't assets have to be put in the trust for you to grow them? I'm going to tell you who the first asset is. The first asset is you, the trustee. Your job as the trustee is to grow the trust assets. Okay? So what do you need to grow the trust assets? I'm going to tell you. You got to have a table and a chair. That's the first office. You have to have an office as you're sitting in the position of trustee. That's an asset, because if you move out of that position as the trustee, then guess what? Your successor trustees or trustees thereafter can come and sit down at something that has value. A table and a chair has value. Now, we can't use a pencil. Why? Because a pencil is wood and it's going to go away. We can't use paper because that may go away. But we don't even want to use the minute book. We want to use the thing that is supposed to be, which is the office. Every business, every entity has to have an office, correct? Right. So if that's the case, then the first office is the asset. It doesn't have to be $1 million. It doesn't have to be the house. It doesn't have to be the car. Those are things that can be created later. But you as the trustee, you have to have value. So the first asset is you. It's not just the table and the chair. It's you sitting in that. You create value for the trust. Okay? So the first asset is you investing in your private education. That's why I've created a system called trustee training, because you have to invest in your private education as a trustee. Private education. Where are you going to do the homework for the private education? You got to have a table and a chair. You got to be able to sit in position to actually have value for the trust. So the first asset of the trust is you in the position of trustee sitting at the table in the chair. Yeah, you can buy pens. Yeah, you can buy paper, but it's you sitting in position as the trustee. And you investing in your education is an asset, because how are you going to grow the trust as a trustee if you're not investing in your education. That means that the trust now is paying whatever monies that it creates, is paying for the trustee to keep growing the assets for the trust. You might go a whole year as the trustee and never really have any asset that's gaining any passive income, any income in general. Why? Because it has to expense its business expenses. You invest, the trust investing in the trustee to get educated, to grow the trust assets is an expense for the trust. So if you right now have some monies that you can say, oh man, I need to go back to school. I got to pay for school. You're supposed to have a trust in place, and a trust is supposed to pay for you to go to school. That's a complete write-off for the trust. Why? Because you are the trustee, and it has to grow the assets of the trust. Well, you being a trustee is an asset for the trust. That's that simple. So you going to school now is a write-off for the trust, because the trust, the only way it's going to grow is if it has a fiduciary that's competent, a fiduciary that's educated in what it needs to know to grow the trust asset and assets in general. So I had to make this video for everybody to be very clear about how to start a trust without any assets. You are the initial asset. Okay? When you want to grow the trust, you got to go out and get a table and chair so you can sit there for the first office. It's called the Board of Trustees. The Board of Trustees. Do you see that sound? Even if it's you as the only trustee of the trust, it's still a Board of Trustees. It's always going to be a Board of Trustees. Even if you have multiple trustees and it went back to you being a trustee by itself, you always have to have a Board of Trustees. Why? Because it's a board. It can have more than one. But you just being the only one there doesn't mean that you're not a trustee or it's not a board. But it has to have a table for the board to sit at. It has to have a chair for the board to sit at. That's why you see organizations, even as with the trust, you see that they have chairmen at the table. Somebody's got to sit at the head of the table. So I just wanted to make this video. Thank you everybody for tuning in live. It's always a pleasure having y'all tune in live. And everybody that listens to the archives. But I wanted to make a quick video for you all to understand that a trust, how to start a trust without an asset. Look, it doesn't need to be millions of dollars. It doesn't need to be all these things that people think about. Oh man, do I have to have assets when I start it? You trying to tell me you can't go get a table and a chair for you to sit there and think about how to get assets in a trust? You can start a trust without even having a table and a chair, without having anything. You can just create the contract that says, okay, this is a trust, it's a legal entity, and now this entity is going to go out and acquire assets. That's very legal. Now, there's a period of time that you have to be able to put things inside of it. Otherwise, it's not going to be considered a trust. You're right. So it has to have assets placed in the trust, but they don't have to be right off the beginning. That's all. I could create an episode where you don't even have to have the beneficiaries right in the beginning. You could just create a trust and it doesn't even have to have the beneficiaries in the beginning. But at least you have to have a trust created, and then you can go out and create assets for the trust. And you definitely have a time period to actually do that. There is a time period. That's per the IRS. That's not me. So there are things that you want to set up in place to actually do so. There's certain things you want to set up in place to actually do so. You sitting in that first office is very critical. And that's a table and chair. I always hear people say, well, do you have to have assets to actually start a trust? Look, you are the asset for the trust, especially in a job. Think about it. In your job, you're the asset. That's why it's so important to have insurance on yourself. Because if you go down, how is the family going to keep eating? How is the trust going to keep eating if you're the only asset for the trust? In the beginning, you got to have things in place. And the trust can take out insurance on you. So now the trust has an insurance policy. That's an asset. That's protecting its greatest asset in the beginning. The trust can take out insurance on its trustee. So now it's able to insure its greatest asset. You are the greatest asset in the beginning, the trustee. If you go down, the trust ain't going to run, even if you got assets in there. Why? Because you might not have someone competent to fill your position on the back end. So it's very critical for you to be able to set things up in place where you and the trust can still survive, or the trust can still survive. Because the trust is its own separate, distinct legal entity. It's like you. It's actually considered a legal person, so called. So it's very important to put that entity in a position where it can have insured on the assets, which is the trustee. That's what you hear called key man insurance. That's why you hear these large corporations have insurance on their CEOs. They don't have insurance on the employees. They make the employees get the insurance on themselves. Why? Because they're not in the best position. Because they don't understand that you can't really employ yourself. A legal entity has to do that. So it's very important for you to put insurances or things in place for the trust. And the greatest asset is you, the trustee. So I'm going to open it up for questions real quick. I see that there's quite a few people on the live stream. I thank you all for tuning in live. I'm gonna take any questions. Greg Clark says he's heated. Hey man, it's an exciting time. It's a great time to be in this position as far as an entrepreneur. And be in a position of own nothing, control everything. Thank you everybody for tuning in live. If you do have any questions on this episode, which is how to start a trust without any assets, feel free to ask through the chat. I definitely am willing to answer them. But I'm gonna be bringing it this month, y'all. This is August. A lot of people y'all know they going on vacation. Sharif Ali, he's alive and well, wide and awake, and I'm ready to feed y'all what y'all need to know so y'all can get enrolled in private trustee training and y'all can move forward with your private family estates. See, no one's trying to help you protect your private family estate. You're in the public and you're doing the whole public dance. It's time to get into the private so we can actually move forward as a people, as a country. The country is being controlled by public entities that are literally just falling apart. And I mean, you see what they're doing. $19 trillion in debt, and literally, what are they doing? The public is general. It's time to be specific. It's time to focus on your family estate, not about the public's welfare. Okay? It's no more welfare. It's feed your family first. It's nothing wrong with that. So, Just Ali says, does 8832 transfer my corporation to a trust? Yes, it does. Very clear. I'm happy that you made that point. So, yes, if you have a traditional corporation right now, that is an asset. You even being the employee or the owner of that entity is an asset. So, when you transfer that entity, yes, that is a document that allows you to create. It's an election of ownership or title. So in turn, you can state to the IRS, that's a legal form that this entity is owned by the actual trust. And once again, that's something you want to go even a little bit deeper than that. Is it Jalil? I think it's Jalil Ali. So if I got it wrong, please forgive me. But what you want to do is you want to go even deeper with that. You want to actually, you want to have in the company bylaws of the LLC or the corporation that you have that the trust has taken ownership of it. You want to make sure that you get that legally notarized because you wanted to make it a legal document. So a part of the actual operating agreement or the bylaws of the entity, you want to have that in there. So if you definitely want to do that. You want to definitely use that document so the IRS can be put on notice. See, in the public, it's all about putting people on notice. Okay, and the private is all about substantiation. So the public is you giving them the 8832. That's the public notice. Okay, that's the IRS. That's the public accounting agency. On the back end of that, you have the substantiation, which is the private, because you're not taking your operating agreement or bylaws to anywhere, to the public. You don't give that to the IRS. They don't ask for that. Okay, so on the back end of that, you want to keep that for the company's private records that the trust is taking ownership, have the trust, sign, the trustee of the trust sign, and things of that nature, move forward in that respect. So that's how you would operate that. But the private is based off substantiation. So you still want to have a private agreement that the trust is owning the corporation now and things of that nature. Peace, the philosophers. Thank you for coming live. I appreciate you joining us live. Just always appreciate the live listeners. If you guys have any questions, Yeah, you said mad people were confused about that. Yeah, the corporations, you can, the corporations, if you guys are even running 1099s right now, the only thing you need to do with your 1099 is go back to the company and say, look, I need to redo my tax form. Why? Because I moved. Okay, so when you go back, you put either your corporation in place or you put your trust in place. And in turn, you move forward in that respect. Now, the trust is going to receive the profits, or it's going to be legally responsible for the profits, because that's 1099. Or the LLC is going to be, responsible for the profits of the 1099. But get yourself out of position where you're not legally liable for those taxes, because that's the issue. What do you think corporations are? They're pass-through entities. That's all they are, is pass-through entities. So they are assets. Greg Clark asked, is Form 56 functional, or is that applicable? I wouldn't say in this case. And this is how, I instruct our clients when it comes to trust is, look, wealthy people know which tax forms to fill out and which ones not to. It's that simple. That's not a form that we're looking to fill out. Okay? So it doesn't have as much application as it would in maybe other situations. That's not something that we make sure that our clients are abreast of and aware of. Like I said, 8832 is dealing with a classification and election of an entity and things of that nature. Entity classification, you want to make sure that it's classified properly, and who as well has the responsibility over that entity and things of that nature. So that is a quality form that people can use. And once again, I don't need to be a tax attorney or a CPA. You all know this. I'm an entrepreneur. I talk to these people. Okay, we hire tax attorneys. We hire CPAs. That's what an entrepreneur does. Okay, you don't have a job. You hire people to have jobs. Okay, so if you guys want to get further clarity on this, I definitely recommend you go talk to a CPA or a lawyer about it. But definitely make it a point to do what you guys got to do. Philosophist says 8822B. Would you use that? Once again, not familiar with that document. We definitely want to keep it as simple as possible. But I know who the philosophist is, and contact me on Facebook, and I'll respond to you. I'll do my research on 8822B, and we'll get back to you on that document. Jalil Ali asks, as a manager of my corporation, am I still eligible to use the benefits of my corporation? Yeah, sure you are. So the thing about it is, on the public side, with the entities, specifically the corporate side, you all there's statutes which basically are limitations. Like there's limits on how many deductions you can take. But when you have that trust up and running, I mean, the trust has no, especially a private trust. We're not talking about public trust here. We're talking about private trust. So what's inside of the contract for the trust, if the trust says that it can take expenses for all meals for business, you just got to make every meal a business expense, and it's a complete write-off. Okay, that's what's in the contract. I'm not making that up. That is what the contract is written into, and no state's going to impair the obligation of contract. That's what you're going to use if someone comes against that fact. Okay, so point being is on the public side with the corporation, with the manager, the benefits, and I recommend you read publication 15B. It's less than 35 pages. You're the manager of a corporation. You're looking to grow it to millions of dollars, and billions of dollars. Of course, you should. Once again, why do you think Donald Trump says he can't pay? He don't have to pay taxes or even show his tax records. He says because he knows the tax law better than anybody. So it's incumbent upon you as an entrepreneur to know the same exact thing. And I'm letting you know that the publication that I'm pretty sure he's abreast of is publication 15B. So you can go to IRS and they'll actually send you that in the mail. They'll actually send you that in the mail, the actual publication 15B, or you can go on the IRS website, publication 15B, and you can read that itself, which is the corporation It's the corporation fringe benefits allowance, and it lets you know what are allowed and what are not allowed. And if not, I tell you all, you guys got to make friends with IRS. Call the IRS. This is an accounting agency. They're not these smooth criminals that are going to come knock on your door. Why? Because you're not looking to evade taxes, so you don't need to think about them knocking on your door. And if you're calling for an entity, that's separate from your social. So if you have some issues with your social, they're not asking when you call and you say, "Hey, I'm calling to ask some questions about a corporation." If they ask for the company EIN, that has nothing to do with your personal social. So feel set at ease on that respect. That it's not about your social. It's about the actual company that you're calling in reference to and getting questions answered on that. So be very happy about that. So yes, publication 15B, you still will be eligible as the manager of your corporation because you're the manager. You need to write into. You can once again get an operating agreement. You can go to a lawyer and say, look, I need you to draft the operating agreement for the best CEO in the world. You should have your operating agreement looking like Donald Trump's. You should have your operating agreement looking like Bill Gates. You need to tell that lawyer, look, I want you to write in this operating agreement to only give my social security number $1. And I need you to max out everything else. I need you to max out my meals. I need you to max out my meal allowance. I need you to max out my clothing allowance. I need to max out my driving allowance, my cell phone allowance, my housing allowance within the state. Especially if you have a state created entity, there's state allowances for those entities. And you can tell a lawyer because they're in that state, that's what they know well. They might not know the private trust side well, but they definitely know the public corporation side well. And so in turn, you ask them to give me an operating agreement that maxes out all of my fringe benefits as a corporate executive. Because here you go, this is what you might not know. Employees are considered different than executives. Okay, so there's an executive operating agreement and then there's an employee operating agreement. Okay, so it's very important for you to have that in place. So just gonna go to some other questions. A private trust can fringe benefit a private trust can be a fringe benefit in and of itself. To a degree, it definitely can. It definitely can. So I agree with that. You definitely can have a trust. I wouldn't want to call it that, the philosophist, only because I know you put a little wink with the eye there for that question, for that statement, but it's a fringe benefit if you know how to use it correctly. You know what I mean? I always like keeping it in a position of ownership and never in a position of it actually receiving the benefits. Let's pass that on to another trust. But you are completely right. You are right. The IRS is cool with the private side. Look, the private side is what they're talking about in the public all the time. You hear the public always talking about where this private corporation in the private sector. The private sector is trust. They are contracts. Nothing more, nothing less. Greg Clark, is the IRS enacts and enforces on behalf of private creditors? So I'll share with you how that situation works. What happens is since a private trust is a contract, what happens is that the IRS is an accounting agency. Let's be very clear about that. Okay. You have to have your private contract, and I'm going to create a video on this too, which is the jurisdiction that the trust is created in, because the contract can be created in a specific jurisdiction. Okay, and so those are the jurisdictions that you have your contract enforced in. Okay, your contract's enforced in a specific jurisdiction, and that's something that you can actually have in place for that specific thing, and I'll create a video talking about that. Okay, and so yeah, philosophy says that just meant in the sense of expenses are deductible from the gross income. 100%. 100%. Definitely expenses. So the IRS is the accounting agency for the Treasury, for sure. And the reason why they're an accounting agency for the Treasury, let's be very clear, even on the private side, the only things that you're reporting is Federal Reserve notes, which are dollar bills in your pocket. They're only accounting for the amount of Federal Reserve notes that are flowing through. Okay, nothing more, nothing less. So if your company is receiving gold and silver, when's the last time you've even been paid in gold and silver? Why? Because that's private. Just like the right to contract, the Article 1, Section 10, the same article that we're drawing our power from for contracting, it has gold and silver for the tender of payments. Okay, that's not something that the IRS is tracking, is gold and silver. They're tracking Federal Reserve notes. Okay, So just wanted to make this video. I don't want to get too long with it with other things off subject other than how to start a trust without any assets. And the way that you start a trust without assets is having a table and chair set up, okay, and you filling that office and you being the first asset as a trustee. You investing in the, not you, but the trust investing in your education for you to go out and actually get educated, more educated, so you can actually grow the asset inside of the trust when it actually acquires it. So the first asset is you, the trustee, and the first office that you fill, the board of trustees. That's why table and chair is so critical. So I want to point that out to you. I will be bringing more information to you all this month. I'm coming every day. Every day. So be ready. I'm excited. Pass this along to your friends and family. Make sure that they're abreast of how to grow and how to start a trust without assets, because a lot of people think they need to do it. It's just a contract. In turn, you have a period of time to actually grow the trust without having any assets in it. But because the trust is its own legal entity, it needs to be investing in the assets. And the first asset is the trustee in that office that he fills in his education. So I just want to thank you all for joining me live. I'm going to be bringing it every day this month. Just know that these are pop-up episodes. I am going to broadcast live every Tuesday at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 7 p.m. Central Standard Time, and 5 Pacific Standard Time to keep it consistent on Tuesdays. But I'm bringing the heat every single day, every day this month of August, just to make sure that you know that I'm wide awake and I'm here to serve. Private trustee training is, if you want to get in contact with me, hfrn.vault@gmail.com. We're going to make sure that you're set up as a private trustee to administer a private trust so you can protect your family estate and go ahead and own nothing, control everything, and get rid of your tax liability personally. Put all the liability on the company, which is the trust, so you can move forward. It's just that simple. Peace. Love you all. Look forward to joining you tomorrow. Peace.